All right, first of all, do we have any issues on the consent agenda?
I just have one small correction. There's a typo under section 24-2024 auto pool cover ordinance. In the second paragraph, the last line, the word chance should be change instead of chance.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of the one change.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on. At this point, we'd like to recognize citizens in the audience. Individual comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. This is for anything that is not on the agenda, so if you have something that you'd like to bring to the city's attention at this time, this would be the chance to do it. Do we have anybody that would like to speak? Are you on? You're on the agenda, though, I think, right?
I got an email that we were off the agenda.
Well,
You got the stage, take it.
yeah, either way.
You tell me what,
It's fine.
Or we can do it when it's,
I think we're going to keep it on the agenda because the news to me was that you were coming, so we kept it on the agenda.
oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. I just really appreciate it. So I will sit down and wait my turn. Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Nobody else? Okay. Now moving into public hearing. The commission will hear a presentation from Finance Director Sandra Barles on the 2025 budget. The commission will conduct a public hearing on the 2025 annual budget and consider adoption of the general appropriations budget resolution.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the city staff for all your input, your research, meetings, to help put together this budget. And also thank you to the city commission for our budget meetings and your guidance and decisions that you made. So our last budget meeting that we had, the numbers that were presented during that meeting have not changed at all. Everything is the same. So I thought that was important for you to know. It's just going to be presented a little bit differently. Okay. So we'll start with the city budget. So we have 7 funds total, and the governmental funds are listed up there. There's 6 of them. The 7th fund is our water and sewer fund, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but for now it's the governmental funds. So really what I wanted to point out here was we have 6 funds, and I'm showing the revenues and expenditures, but what I wanted to point out is we plan to have $214,760,000 at the end of the year to add to our fund balance. So the estimated fund balance at the end of the year should be $6.6 million. And we'll talk more about the fund balance in just a minute. Sorry, I'm getting used to it. There we go. So this is the governmental funds expenditures expected for the year. So the total is $14,468,000. That's for the total governmental funds, not just the general fund. And we'll talk more about the general fund in a moment. But if you look from fiscal 24, where we are now, to fiscal 25, the difference is pretty flat. Our expenditures are expected to be fairly the same. However, we did have a large expense in fiscal 24 of purchasing a fire truck, the down payment. So if you were to take that expenditure out, we're expected to increase right around 3%. So really a modest increase in overall expenses. So we'll begin with revenue though. So where does our revenue come from? Well, property taxes. That's our largest revenue source. So we should take a look at that. If you look at our assessed value and our taxable value and you're comparing it from this current year to the coming year, it's increased both by 6%. So the total revenues that we're expecting is $12,097,500. That's an increase of $687,500 overall. And then we also receive money from the state revenue sharing, which is our sales tax. And that's roughly about $500,000 a year. And that's what we're expecting this coming year. And then there's license and permits. It's mostly our building department. So that would be permits and registration type fees. So the majority of it is that, which is about another $500,000. But we also receive like cell tower revenue and franchise fees that's rolled into that license and permits. And we'll look at the exact numbers in just a minute. Other revenue is where everything else is lumped into. So that would be charges for services. That would be things like the public safety overtime reimbursement or planning commission fees and right-of-way fees and things that we would charge for services. And then investment income, that's a portion of our revenue. And then I listed grants. So grants are something that we don't budget for because it's not a guarantee unless it's in our bank account. So this current year, we already had the ARPA funds for our fire truck in our bank, so we did budget for it for fiscal '24. But for next year, for fiscal '25, we didn't put anything in the budget. But I wanted to put it up here just to quickly discuss it because we have received, been awarded and received $556,000 this year in grant money. We have been approved or awarded for $100,000 for water and sewer, another $15,000 for some miscellaneous things, and then $1 million for the Chesterfield Bridge project for, we believe, for the coming year. But it's not in the budget again. There's also another $20,000 pending that we have applied for but just haven't heard back yet. So I think it's important to point out grants. It's a great revenue source. Some are really large and some are really small, but we don't budget for it. And then lastly is state revenue sharing that comes from our gas tax. It's also known as Act 51. That goes to our road funds. It's restricted and can only be used on the roads. So the first 4 goes to our general fund, and then the state revenue sharing is for local and major roads. So if we look at just the general fund, the proposed budget revenue is $13,388,500. And you can see right there the property tax percent is 87%. Followed by license and permits, which is mostly the building department at 5%, and then state revenue sharing at 4%, and the other 2 categories at 2% apiece. So then expenditures, where does our money go? Operations and personnel. So operations are assessing, attorney, engineering, building department, elections, building and grounds, that sort of thing. And then, of course, personnel is salary and benefits. And then legacy costs. So we'll look at legacy costs closer. So that is our pension and our retiree medical. So if you look at the chart over on the side, if you're interested, for the number of participants, but what I wanted to point out is these 2 benefits are closed to new employees. In fact, they've been closed for quite some time. So our total liability is not going to grow substantial. If you look at the chart, you can see our total liability for pension is $48.5 million, and OPEB is around $12 million. But the second column shows what we have in assets. So our pension is 73% funded with OPEB at 59%. And then we have about $18 million of unfunded liability. So we've discussed and the commission would like to add discretionary funds to those to build up our assets. So in the coming years, we'll be reviewing on a yearly basis, but for fiscal '25, we'll be adding to our pension some discretionary funds. So in doing so, we should foresee our pension being fully funded by 2032 and our OPEB by 2030. Things could change, a lot of things affect the liability, and affect the assets as far as investments and stuff. So, but it's not too far in the future, so that's good news. And then we also have capital purchases. So we've discussed in detail what all of our capital purchases are. They're not listed individually here, but they will be in a budget book that will be posted on our website. If anyone's interested, we'll have all the details with the cost of each individual purchase. But for now, this is just summarized to show that our total capital expenditures are expected to be at $517,570. And you can see the categories up top: IT and public safety, Department of Public Works, and site improvements. I'm not going to go into each one of those again, but if you're interested, you'll find it on our website. We also have debt obligations, so we have 2 bonds, with the 2010 road bond being paid off this year. It's our last payment of $508,750, and then our pension, let's see, is $1.13 million. So our pension bond will be paid off in 2034. So that's right around the time when we should be 100% funded. So that's exciting. I mean, we can see it on the horizon. It's not too far out. It's 10 years away. You know, it's not too far into the future. So I like seeing that. Infrastructure. So this is our road construction fund. You can see on the streets that are listed there, that's in the northeast corner of the city. That construction project is estimated at $720,000, and you can see the funding source, tax income of $500,000, and then the local road fund will contribute to that. And then lastly, where does our money go? Well, the balance of the revenue minus expenditures goes to our fund balance. So I mentioned earlier that we're expecting $214,000 to be put back into the fund balance at the end. So let's take a look at that. So this is, you can see 2023 actual, what we're expected for the end of this fiscal year, and then proposed and forecasted out. So the 2 red lines going across at 30 to 35% is where Commission has a policy where the unfunded, or I'm sorry, the unassigned fund balance percentage of expenditures needs to be within that range. And so the unassigned fund balance is really just our savings, our fund balance, minus anything that's reserved or restricted for something in particular. So you can see the percentage is either above or between that 30 and 35% as a forecast. And these numbers are conservative. The revenue, very conservative going into the future. And then it also includes contributing $500,000 a year for pension and $500,000 a year for OPEB. So it's a nice, it's a healthy fund balance. This is the general fund proposed expenditures at $13,185,000,000. So salary and benefits is the 40% of that, followed by the legacy costs or the pension OPEB at 22%. That doesn't include any of the discretionary, but no, I'm sorry, it does. That does include the discretionary. And then 20% for operating expenses, our debt at 12%, and then those capital expenditures are at 5%. And then our major and local roads, as I mentioned earlier, our revenue from the state for the gas tax, or Act 51, that's our major source of revenue for fixing our roads. The main purpose is for routine winter maintenance and then non-winter maintenance to keep our roads looking good. But also this year we're proposing $220,000 of that to contribute towards that road construction project that I just talked about. So that fund balance is pretty healthy as well. At $821,000 is the expected end fund balance. And then lastly is the water and sewer. So you can see our current projects that we have underway is the service line verifications and the sanitary sewer study and the water system redundancy plan. That has been, that's what I mentioned earlier about the grant money that we received. It's a $100,000 grant with a $100,000 match. So we won't finish that this year. It'll go over into fiscal 25. And then the revenue is a reimbursement, so we'll receive that reimbursement in fiscal 25. And then we have the the water bond payment of $366,000 roughly, with one more year after that to pay off that bond. And then you can see the proposed projects, the Eastways water main relocation, which may start in June, but probably won't be finished till after the fiscal year starts. And then the sanitary pipelining, it's a 2-year project of $600,000 each year. And then a couple other maintenance type projects that need to take place next year. So the water and sewer rates will come next month to commission for approval. I think I can safely say, Leah, that it's just going to be a small increase to those rates, but we're still working on that, and that'll be presented to you next month. So that is it for the budget presentation, and it's really just a summary of everything we already spoke of. And the resolution is in your packet. And
Thank you for all your hard work.
of course, thank you.
Any other comments? Do you have a motion to approve the budget?
I move that after public hearing, we approve and adopt the City of Bloomfield Hills fiscal year 2025 annual budget and the General Appropriations Act budget resolution as included in our agenda packet for tonight's meeting.
Mr. Mayor, before the motion is second, we should make sure that there's nobody in the public that has any comment.
I apologize. Anybody have any comments regarding the budget?
Sorry.
Nope.
Second.
Appreciate it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you, Sandra. All right, next up, the commission will discuss the special events ordinance, although I should say that we're not here actually really to adopt or change this existing ordinance or to create a new ordinance. I think what we'd like to do tonight is to listen to the public. We'd like to hear both sides of the story, if we have both sides of the story here tonight. So I'd like to open it up for discussion so that the commission can hear both sides of this story, and this story is what we're talking about is a tent that has been somewhat institutionalized over the last several years at Christ Church, and so we're kind of caught in the middle here, and we just would like to hear from the public on this issue. So does anybody want to get started? Do we have a Mr. Erskine here?
What's that?
Scott Erskine?
Yes, I'm here.
Would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you very much. much. I'm Scott Erskine, the co-chancellor for the church. I was here at the last meeting. Tonight we have the senior warden, the junior warden, and Pastor Manisha is here as well. Over the last, I don't know, since the last meeting, Father Bill and I have met with the city manager and with Mr. Beckerleg, and we believe we're making progress toward hopefully some sort of resolution. I've had follow-up conversations with Mr. Beckerleg as recently as today, in fact. We're hopeful to get a resolution for a variety of reasons, one of which is that I think it was Pastor Manisha yesterday, received a telephone call from local media asking about this issue. And we had discussed with the folks at Christ Church to make sure, actually, after speaking with Mr. Beckerleg and the city manager, they said, let's keep this out of the media. We agreed. Someone didn't keep it out of the media. Pastor Manisha offered no comment, which I applauded her for. Then also recently, twice in the last, I think one was the day that there was a service for Father Bill's mother, and then on Mother's Day, this last Sunday, some concerned residents called the police about the parking at Christ Church, and the police were out on both occasions, and we're hoping before this escalates any further, we can reach some sort of resolution. We do know that there have been a couple residents that have submitted letters, and we've read them, and we've looked at them. I went through past minutes and realized that one of the residents is, if you look back in August of 2020, when the church was proposing its expansion, one of the residents was a person who opposed the church expansion back in 2020, and the other resident is the son, was also opposed. His son opposed the 2020 expansion, and now the father is opposing the tent. As far as we can tell, it's two residents. We're willing to listen, we're willing to work with everyone. We've discussed relocating the tent, we've discussed the timeline for the tent being up. But as it stands, the church would like to seek a resolution before this goes any further, and that's why we've been actively discussing the issue with the city.
Thank you, Mr. Erskine. Do you have any documentation or graphics showing where the tent could potentially be moved to? Or?
No, well, one of the places that we talked about was where it was during COVID. It was down on the patio, and the patio is undergoing, I believe, is it this year or next year, or maybe it's undergoing a renovation, and so putting it there now would delay the renovation. But one of the things that we've suggested is we could move it there. It's sunk in there. So to the extent that people are driving along the road, they would see it for a shorter period of time. I've driven all around the church, and there may be one home that they can see it maybe from their house, where it's been the last couple of years. The rest of the residents can't. We're blessed to live in a beautiful state here in Michigan with a lot of dense foliage, and so in the months that the tent is up, all you see is green, and that's a good thing. And so that leaves just people driving down the road, catching a glimpse of it. The tent is used for worship. It's used by the Boy Scouts to hold meetings. It's used for AA meetings. It's used for a lot of great purposes. And I know in January, this commission discussed updating the COVID procedures in this very meeting, at the January meeting. And there are folks at Christ Church where this is the only time that they feel safe to worship, is by coming to an outdoor venue, a tent, no sides, where they can, other than, they don't feel safe worshiping indoors. And not having this tent would take that away from them. Just like there are, for the same reason the city updated its COVID policies is because people are still concerned, and citizens of the city are still concerned about COVID. Some aren't, many aren't, but a lot are. And the tent provides an important avenue for the church to have for parishioners who want to worship safely. We did not bring any graphs or anything. We can show Mr. Beckerleg and city manager where exactly it could go. We read some of the comments, some of them. One of the things by putting it, there was a concern by one of the two residents, that the lines or where they could cause a tripping hazard, where the tent is secured. Well, that hasn't happened, but by putting it down by the patio, we could put in permanent, not intrusive, but permanent supports, which would mean fewer ropes holding it up, which would make it even safer. And again, there's never been an incident, but it would be safer if it were there. Another suggestion was made by one of the residents that their concern is that bad actors may be hanging out under the tent, surveilling homes for break-ins. And I believe that's they're referring to the Chilean gangs, which, as a matter of fact, Christ Church hosted the Oakland County Sheriff yesterday for a talk on that. And it sounds like, from what the Oakland County Sheriff said, is that these Chilean gangs are hiding out in the bushes, in the foliage, and they're using drones and they're using trail cams, not hiding out under a tent with no sides. But I mean, we understand the concern, but there's never been a complaint that someone was there under the pretense of worshiping, but actually was trying to surveil the area. There's never been a complaint to the church. We don't believe there's ever been a complaint to the police. What's interesting is when I was discussing the concerns with the church, I learned that the other resident that has voiced concerns about this, I don't know how many years back, was having a family event and needed a tent put up and asked the church if they could put the tent on the church property for their family event. And the church, being a good neighbor, said, of course. But, as far as we can tell, this is two residents. And we don't see why two residents should stop worship from taking place, where people will feel safe, and should stop the Boy Scouts from congregating, people going to AA meetings under the tent, and a whole host of other services that...
Please know we have no interest in preventing anyone from worshiping. We just don't know that it has to be under a tent. But we would welcome everybody to worship on your grounds, any type of gathering. We don't want it to come across like we are preventing any of that.
No, I understand that, but when it's raining, then the folks that don't feel safe can't.
You have a renovation, you have a beautiful building.
We do. But just like all companies and groups, and everyone is still dealing with folks in companies, organizations, churches that are afraid of COVID. And again, right here, this very commission discussed that COVID is still a thing and what they should do for meetings like this in January. I watched the video.
Excuse me, Dirk, did you have a...
I do. Scott, there were a couple of things that you spoke to Dave and myself about. One of them was possibly shortening the duration that the tent is up.
Yes.
And maybe if you could talk about that. And then the other issue that we had raised was that some people were complaining about pillows and things that were left out overnight, and you thought there was maybe a fairly simple solution to that too.
Yeah, so one of the things that Father Bill said is that he's really more interested in having it up from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Or in that general range. I think actually this year, because of the way the calendar works, it's even a little shorter than that. And I know in the past, there had been permit applications that had been approved for up to, I think it was 5 months. Is that accurate?
I think it was from Memorial Day to mid-October, so however long that.
Yeah, I think it was longer, but this would be a shortened period of time. And also there was, I guess, a suggestion that there was some furniture left under the tent or pillows or something. And the simple solution that we came up with is we can remove those in the evening. If those were left out, they shouldn't have been. But we can easily pull those inside.
Is this change or moving to the patio area, which is a lower area, would that be something that you would do this season, or?
No, because in order to put in the supports and to renovate the patio, we would have to be doing that. Is that this year?
It is not.
It's next year?
It's planned for later, yeah, after the capital campaign.
Okay,
So when would that be ready for the tent, if you were to move your tent? If you were to build your patio, when were you planning on building it?
I think the patio's already there, right?
The patio's there, it needs certainly the renovations that Scott indicated. We are in a funding process right now for that project. That needs to come to fruition, and then the planning side. So potentially it starts getting worked on next summer for availability after that.
And one thing we could talk to Father Bill about is, in the meantime, if they're not going to get to it this summer, which I think he was hoping they would, they could put it down there this summer. I would just have to make sure with Father Bill that would work, because it has been there in the past, and then ask for a variance for the summer when they're putting in the more permanent, when they're redoing the patio, because obviously they can't work on it under the tent. If for whatever time period that is where they're working at redoing the patio.
So I'm not sure if I heard correctly. So you would work on it this summer and be ready for next summer to move it in, or work on it
Start working on it next summer.
Oh, so the tent would remain in the current location, or where it's been previously, for 2 more summers.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially, or I could talk to Father Bill about moving it down to the patio for this summer. And then
Oh, I see. Yeah.
out so that it's for next summer, so it can be worked on, having that 1 year where it's, or maybe if it's not till the summer after that, then 2 years from now, have it move out temporarily while they work on the patio, and then put it back down.
Okay.
I guess I don't understand why, if moving's an option, and if it's appealing, if it is appealing to everybody, why it's so tricky to determine when you can do it. I mean, are there footings for this tenting that you have to have in place, or there?
No, but there would be what we were discussing with Mr. Beckerleg and the city manager is putting in special footings so it's easier to secure it to the patio. And they're not there now, and it's been there, and you can secure it the traditional way now. But it would be faster, and it would be even more stable. It's never fallen down, but it would be like super stable, and you would need less lines going out, and if we could put the footings in while we redo it. It's just an improved design, considering the fact that you're going to be putting a tent there.
No, I get it, but I'm also kind of puzzled.
What I don't understand is we have, like I said, we welcome you to worship, and we think you have a beautiful facility. We're just not comfortable with a tent being up in the city for more than 30 days. In general, just for the whole Bloomfield Hills. And I personally am afraid of a precedent being set, and I understood you needed it during COVID, but I feel that time has passed.
Well, the tent's been up at Christ Church for, I believe, 20 years.
And that's not what I understand. But.
Is that in some form or fashion? It's a new tent, because the old tent, I mean, eventually they wore out. So the old tent wore out, so a new tent was purchased in 2020. But there was a tent in 2019, 2018, 2017. It was just a different tent. And we're not asking for the variance. Right now, you can have a tent out. for a longer period of time. What was being proposed, I thought, was no more than 3 days or 5 days, 3 times, which isn't 30 days, it's 15.
Well, there were 2 ordinances being considered, but
And
it's
then,
changed.
you know, there was talk here that that will affect Cranbrook, the school. Because it's not just Christ Church. Cranbrook has tents up all summer for weddings, for a bunch of different events. And I know there was discussion about how could Cranbrook still be allowed to do this while we
No,
didn't
they're
allow.
just up for 5 days. Yours is up, you would like to have a tent up the whole summer, I understand.
Right, but under the ordinance that was passed, the ordinance that was talked about most recently, the maximum would be 15 days. And Cranbrook has tents up more than 15 days every summer. It's not just Christ Church. And if there's going to be an ordinance, it's got to apply to everybody.
Absolutely.
So then Cranbrook will not be allowed to have their tents up.
The most recent ordinance actually was considered April 9th, and it allowed for 5 days, and then if you wanted from 5 to 30 days could be approved by the city manager, and then beyond 30 days could be approved by the city commission. That was the most recent iteration. That was looked at in April 9th.
Right, but I think you and I discussed under Berlupa.
You would actually make the comments here too. And
Right. You can't have that provision that it can be extended by the commission. Because although you all may very well do that, someday there will be other folks sitting in those seats and they may not want to for a variety of reasons, and that's what's not allowed under federal law. And I guess our question would be, it's always been allowed to have a tent up for a longer period of time, and there hasn't been a limit. And we're wondering why there should be a limit now. The only thing that's changed is 2 residents wrote letters. Those same 2 residents wrote letters saying they didn't want the church to be expanded. I mean, we're making a change for 2 residents?
I don't know that that's the case,
Well,
but
yeah, we're not talking about making any changes at this point in time. This is discussion around your point of view, and if we have anybody else tonight that wants to speak, we'd like to get your thoughts as well. I just would like to clarify something. So I think I heard you said you'd be willing to move the tent to the new location this year and then work on it next year where it would have to move away so that you could work on that area. So it could be, you could move it this year, it would be out where it was, where it's been next year, and then the year after that it would go back more or less permanently in that patio area. Is that
I would just have to talk to Father Bill really quickly, and unfortunately he's out of the country.
okay?
But I believe he would be more than happy to move it down to the patio area for this
Okay.
year. And then, again, it's simply you can't work on the patio with the tent
Sure.
covering the patio. And
Yep.
that's why it would have to move out for the one period of time, whether it's next year or the following year, whenever that is.
Right.
Was there also, can I ask a point of clarification also, was there any discussion about maybe starting it late, like mid-June, and then go, maybe stop at Labor Day?
It depends on the calendar, so that's what I said, like, in general, when we discussed, he had said something about Memorial Day to Labor Day, but this year, I think he was contemplating, like, at the end of the first week of June or the beginning of the second week of June. And I think that had something to do with the church calendar. But he had mentioned that it wasn't going to be right on Memorial Day, that they were contemplating seeking a permit for.
And also furniture, I mean, let's talk about pillows and that sort of thing, but I've heard some comments about actual furniture getting stacked up or just kind of sitting out there. Is that something that you would police, so to speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Mr. Erskine?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Please identify yourself and
Certainly.
I'm not
So you're
used to
front and
doing
center.
this, so I apologize. My name's Tom Belanis. I'm a resident at 320 Dunstan. My wife and I, Lauren, have lived there since March of 2008. We've also been members of Christ Church since the same time, since March of 2008. I want to address a couple of things that Scott said because they're relevant to me. Number one, he made reference to one of the people having a tent on church property. That's 100% accurate. Father Bill Danaher married my daughter in 2018. We had a wedding, my daughter's wedding in her backyard, and we needed to use the side property that the church owned at one time that had been gifted to them. And they were kind enough to let us use it. That tent was up for no more than 5 days, I promise you that. With regard to the parking tickets on Mother's Day, there's a yellow curb in the area where Scott was referring to. There's handicap spots in front of the church. I walk my dog all the time there. It's a neighborhood in which we live, a neighborhood in which we pay taxes, a neighborhood in which the police patrol regularly. When there are cars parked on that yellow curb, it hinders the ability of traffic to get through too wide. I talked to 2 officers that stopped by my house last week. It would hinder, if those cars were parked there, the ability of a fire truck to get down there. If there's a yellow curb there, the cars are parked illegally. That's why they got tickets. They didn't get tickets because they were parked legally. I want to echo something that Lauren Fisher said, that no one's stopping anyone from congregating for anything. I think, like I said, we've been members of Church, Christ Church, I think that's 16 years, I think. But you don't need a tent to worship outdoors. You just don't. You can worship outdoors all you want. You can sit outside. If it's raining, you can have an umbrella. And I can tell you with certainty from reading newsletters that I get and from conversations that I had directly with Bill Danaher, that the tent that we're talking about here was erected in 2020 as an accommodation to COVID to allow people the opportunity to worship outside. And it was a great idea at the time. It really was. As far as tents in prior years, again, I've lived in that area 3 doors down the street from Christ Church since March of 2008. There was, I can say with 100% certainty, there was not a tent in the island in front of Christ Church in that period of time. There was a tent. I called it the Cirque du Soleil tent because I actually liked it, because it had a nice architectural tent that was more or less attached to the church, I think, in the area on the patio that you were talking about, Scott. I don't know what happened to that tent. I don't know where it is, if it's gone. But if that's the location to which you're referring, fine, but there was never a tent prior to 2020 in the location that it is now. That's just simple, plain fact. I watched with interest the April 9th City Commission meeting. The conversation that you all had about an amendment to the special events ordinance. Bill Danaher's comments with regard to that. And what I did was I went out and I put together a petition that is in support of amending the special events ordinance, because here's what I would tell you, and I believe this isn't about the church. This is about the ability to have a tent, which by definition is a temporary structure, for a longer than necessary period of time. So one of the things that have been proposed, and when I put together this petition, and I'll hand it to you all as well so you have it, this is petition in support of amending the special events ordinance. We are in support of the proposed amendment to the City of Bloomfield Hills Special Events Ordinance, Chapter 17.5, currently being considered by the City Commission to regulate the erection, placement, and duration of tents being used within the city as follows. 1, limit tent usage on any property in the city for no more than 5 consecutive days in a calendar year. 2, allow for usage up to 30 days tent usage in a calendar year with approval from the city manager after their determining it does not negatively affect or become a nuisance to the surrounding neighborhood. 3, allow application to city commission for tent usage greater than 30 days in a calendar year, with the application explaining the reason for the use, and the city commission determining it does not negatively affect or become a nuisance to the surrounding neighborhood. Lastly, all tents shall comply with the fire prevention code, the city building code, and the city zoning ordinance regardless of duration. I have 16 neighbors signed up for that, not 2. These are all homeowners, taxpaying citizens of the city of Bloomfield Hills. We can agree to disagree on the COVID aspect of this, but I'm curious as to if somebody is so concerned about COVID, what do they do for the other 9 months of the year when the tent's not there? Maybe there's a good answer for that. Again, to me, this isn't about the church. If you take the language that was written and that was discussed in your meeting on April 9th, and you were to look at that in its purest form, as homeowners and residents of the city of Bloomfield Hills, why wouldn't you want that? It seems reasonable to me. It doesn't seem unreasonable. If I guess the flip side of that would be is any of you, and I've had this conversation with others, if all of a sudden you were living in your home and somebody put up a tent in their backyard next door to you, and it was there for a week, and then 30 days, and then 60 days, and then 90 days, and you drove by it every day, that'd be okay with you? I don't think it would. And this is no different. This, again, is not about stopping the church from congregating or worshiping or having people there and doing whatever it is that they want to do on their new campus. This is about governance as it relates to tents. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Any questions?
The only question I would have is I think what you're proposing is makes a lot of sense, but on the other hand, leaving it up to perhaps an individual to make the choice about whether a tent can go up or not, how do we get around that aspect?
Leaving it to an individual, what do you mean?
Like the city manager and
with the risk of being funny, that's why you get paid the big bucks, right?
Well, I mean, we love our city manager, but it may, at some point in the future, it may be a different city manager, it may be a different person, it may be a different mindset, it may be,
That could be true of any law that's on the books that gives discretion. Wherever there's discretion, you always have the ability for people to change and for decisions to change. I don't know how to answer that other than, again, that could apply to almost anything that you do.
Well, and the tax-paying residents vote for us, so I guess that would be the voice that the residents have if this is implemented.
Yeah, beyond the 30 days.
Beyond 30 days.
Okay. Any other questions?
Good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else who'd like to speak? Do we? Okay. Go ahead and please identify yourself.
I'm Pastor Manisha Pastor. I'm the Senior Associate Rector at Christ Church Quinbrook. Father Bill Danaher is my boss, and I've been privileged to work with him for 10 years. We've done a lot of good work in the church, including we've started an interfaith dental program, and we've done work in the community, especially in Pontiac. We're super excited about the work we're doing with Baldwin Center, Micah 6, etc. I'm here because I'm very grateful for the deep concern and promise that religious institutions can worship, and that is what we're doing. It is a profound experience to worship the God that we believe in, the God we trust, and the God who has made this beautiful earth out in the beautiful spaces that God has gifted us. To be able to worship together, to congregate together, to meet together, to take care of one another, to hope together, to suffer together. All of that can happen when the city and our nation and our public spaces give religious communities the opportunity to do that. And I'm so delighted that when COVID hit, we were given that space to do that. And what we found is that worshiping with one another in our area, in our beautiful space, indoors and outdoors, has allowed our community to grow in our belief in God. It has allowed our community to trust God in a way that's very, very important to creating amazing citizens who deeply care for this world and its stewardship. I would be concerned if someone told me how to worship on the church grounds. If someone said to me, you know, you can't put an altar here, or you can't use whatever facility that you want. It is really my decision how I think the congregation is called to worship. It is the clergy's responsibility to figure out how to create spaces and places to allow people to experience the beauty of God. This tent has done that profoundly for years now. I would be concerned if it was understood as anything less than an implement of worship. Because of that, it is really quite necessary for us to have it. And we have talked in the church how to, limit the time so we're not going from Memorial Day on. And so we're going to have our outdoor worship series beginning in mid-June. And we're going to go through what we call Welcome Back Sunday, when everyone goes away for the summer and then they come back after Labor Day, and all the kids come back and everything like that. And that's the big Sunday that we're going to have. I think it's September 8th, and then we'll take it down. And it will allow for our congregation to do the good work of remembering the God who has made everything, including tents. So I'm hopeful that you will hear that that's the purpose of this tent. It is to allow for us to worship fully and completely. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Peter Gafari. I'm the son of Brad French. So I just briefly wanted to mention a couple items. Tom and my parents are neighbors of the church. They have been since 1992. So naturally, the actions of the church will be felt and heard by its immediate neighbors. Father Bill said he doesn't have neighbors last month. That was hurtful to my family. To claim that his only neighbor is the Cranbrook educational community. That's not true. The actions of the church impact many homes in the area. And we did express concern in 2020 about the construction project. We did not oppose the construction project. We opposed the closing of Cranbrook Road as Brookside was attempting to reopen during COVID due to traffic concerns. We did not oppose the project. We asked that the project re-examine the traffic flow. I want to be very clear about that. I am very much in support of the proposal, the proposed ordinance. My family is as well. We very much appreciate the church's right to worship. There's not been a tent there consistently. I asked my parents, who have been there since 1992, has there been a tent? And they said, absolutely not. Perhaps occasionally for special events, convocation, different graduation ceremonies, but certainly has there not consistently been a tent on the island. We have concerns about the furniture. There's consistently garbage on the island. There's consistently furniture strewn about. Those are concerns we have that come with the way that space is being used. It's inconsistent with the neighborhood. We know the church to hold itself to a wonderful standard. It's an amazing place, an amazing institution, one that is very important to my family as well. We would just like to see the outdoor worship aspect handled differently. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm parched. Excuse me. My name is Trey Bryce. I'm a real estate lawyer with Taft Law here on behalf of Tom. I want to kind of take pieces of what's been said to spin this in what I think is really what we're here for. And you had started with we've got two sides, and I think that's maybe an impediment to what we're doing. Really, the council is considering adopting either a new ordinance or amending the special events ordinance. So it's not two sides. It's how does this ordinance serve the city, the residents, and all the properties there. And even from some of the comments we've got that the Cranbrook has some tents. We know there's tents that go up during the Dream Cruise on Woodward, day camps, all kinds of tents. So it's not just a two-sided. This particular issue with Christchurch Cranbrook may have brought it up and may have come to the surface like, wow, we don't have a way to control these. And that's good governance, is to have zoning to say how we control certain things to protect the public safety from general things, from crime, the aesthetics of the beautiful neighborhood that you guys have, and half that protects the property values as well. And the ordinance as presented isn't discriminatory in any way. It would apply to everybody. And Ms. Fish, you made the comment, if we allow one legally, you actually then have to allow all. You could have tents along Woodward for 180 days if you start letting everybody else do it. All of the wishes and hopes, and that's really what that is nothing, as you pointed out consistently in the ordinance as proposed, and maybe there's some tweaks that still need to happen through some of your conversations and public meetings on it. A lot of them are likes and wishes, not needs. And the fact that the AA and the Scouts can go, that's great, but it doesn't impact the church's ability to worship and the people's ability to worship. And that's the standard, at least with the slight reference to the religious land use, and I won't get into that. Mr. Beckley gave you a good primer on it at the last meeting. I know you're well handled on that. Is when we look at the ordinance, it is going to control everything. And it is the safety to look at the setbacks, the sight lines, the requirements of the fire safety, all those things. Those are important things. And right now there isn't a control within the city to handle that. And so when you're looking at it, it's a sensible amendment to make sure that you have these controls. And I mentioned maybe the church brought it up, but there's always a first. That's why you guys have the ability to put moratoriums on growth or on certain types of developments to figure out, whoa, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We need to get some controls in place. And that's really the prudent thing that I think council is doing here. And that's, I think, a better way to look at it. And even more so, all of the things that were kind of asked for could still happen under the ordinance. They could go and get a tent permit. They would be allowed to have their services under it. They could have the AA meetings, the Scouts, whatever they would want within the confines of how the ordinance controls it, whether that be a few days, whether it gets the longer or even comes to you and gets a bigger thing. Those are all within your purview. But until you adopt the amendment, you don't have those controls. And so really it's a better way to look at it. These are the legal structures of what government is here for, to protect all of our neighbors, and not just looking at one and maybe a good neighbor in some instances that where we could fix this and we could put this over here, and that's fantastic. And that would be fantastic under the ordinance. But what the situation kind of points out is the what ifs for everything else in the city. And that's, I think, why you really need to take the step and think about the ordinance kind of strong and hard as a way to better your community. And in that process, I do think that everything will happen, and it doesn't discriminate. It applies to everybody equally. It applies to all denominations equally. It doesn't pick one over the other. And I think that will actually, in the long run, help the city. And so I'm not going to parrot what else has been said, because you guys have heard that. So if any questions, fine, or I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dirk, I've heard now twice that this as proposed does not discriminate. Could you elaborate on your thoughts around that?
Sure. In my opinion, the first iteration of the ordinance, which was considered at the February meeting, which provided for, I believe it was three separate opportunities. You could do it for 5 days each. That was uniform, and that was across the board. The version of the ordinance that we looked at in April 9th of 24, that ordinance, because of the safety valve, if you want to call it, or the discretion that was allowed, allowing the city manager to grant up to 30 days and to allow the city commission to grant up past 30 days for a period longer than 30 days. That discretionary element could run afoul of RLUIPA. So it would be my advice that the commission not adopt that version of the ordinance. If it's going to adopt a version of an ordinance, I think the discretionary portion needs to be taken out, a time period established, and it doesn't have to be 3 5-day periods. It can be 30 days, it can be 6 months, it can be whatever. But whatever ordinance you adopt, the discretionary portion's got to be taken out, and it's got to be completely uniform and apply to all property owners of the city. And that the first ordinance did. The second ordinance, because of the discretionary portion, was more problematic.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have anybody else that wants to speak? Okay. Any comments from commissioners? Okay. Well, I think where we are with this right now is we've heard from, I don't want to call it both sides, and in fact it would be great if you all could get together and come to a solution without all of this, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So I think what we need to do is take a beat, and we've heard both sides, and we'll have to take this up at another time, because we're not prepared to make any calls on or any changes to the current special events ordinance. And so yeah, I think we're going to have to postpone any decisions on this until a later time. Okay. All right, moving on. We will now discuss the auto pool cover ordinance, or we don't have an ordinance for auto pool covers, but Mr. Craig?
Thank you. So thanks for having me back. It's our new monthly date night. I'm enjoying learning about the city, and I was intrigued by the budget. I have to commend everyone. It's very impressive to be able to accomplish the things you have in a challenging financial market, and to be able to also qualify for some grants. So whomever accomplished that, that's terrific. That helps all of us. I also noticed how significant the expenses were relating to operations. And I know many of you are probably very tired. Some of you were at the planning commission meeting before, right? How many? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members of this team, volunteers and staff. And I want to just remind everyone that a huge percentage, and I think Mr. Hendrickson said over 50%, maybe 60% of those were relating to fences and pools. And we have an opportunity as a community to adopt what is the standard in the state of Michigan, as well as the standard throughout the country, to allow the use of an auto cover And I did put together a quick little presentation. I can try and figure out how to plug this in, if I can, which I think I can. Turns out. Look at that. So, just briefly in sum, in prior meetings and conversations, we talked a lot about the safety. And I wanted to point everyone's attention to the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance. This is an organization that's founded, and I put its mission statement and its core purpose up on the board, and I have handouts for you as well. But its purpose is effectively to standardize the industry, and that a lot rallies around research, development, education, and safety being a primary driver and concern. And the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance has a committee. It's a national organization, and one of their largest and most significant efforts is creating safety regulations. This is something that's not decided out of nowhere, but something that's very well thought out, researched. There are comment periods, and every 4 years, the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance work with the International Code Committee to develop what's called the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. And this is a reference to the 2015 code, which is the current version that's applicable. And I wanted just to highlight something from it. So the Hot Tub Pool and Spa Alliance, along with the engineers and other administrators that work with the International Committee for the Code, developed this in 2015 and adopted it after much research and thought, right? And specifically it states, when properly installed, I'm reading the second paragraph, it addresses the safety cover, which we know what that is, but stating when properly installed or deployed, a safety cover listed to the ASTM spec provides the same protection against entry to the vessel by children as does a fence-type barrier constructed in accordance with Section 305. So this standard adopted in 2015 is the recognized standard after many people that are much more intelligent than I am and spent all the time to research the issue made the decision. I just wanted to also highlight that in the actual code section itself, it also states a cover installed on a pool or installed on a spa or hot tub offers the same level of protection as the barrier, so barriers are not required. And then the commentary references powered safety covers and residential swimming pools, respectively. So, the organizations that are responsible for coming up with all the codes that the city enforces, they came up with this very code. Just to clarify, why am I talking about the Hot Tub Pool Alliance? Why am I talking about the swimming pool code? Well, that's because the Michigan Building Code itself, which was adopted in 2015, references the swimming pool code. So in other words, all of the state of Michigan references the section in the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code that I showed. So effectively, any community in Michigan and any community that does not otherwise have a specific ordinance dealing with this issue adopts this by design. Some facts I just thought everyone should think about, because a lot of this comes to regulation with concern over protecting residents. I think we can all agree that having a fence is not something that we desire, and that having a community that has fewer fences or no fences is desirable. I think we can all agree that having the administrative burden and costs relating to the administration of having those fences is not something that we want. And we would love to reduce our operating expenses, but we have to do so in a safe way. And all of those that have done the research have told us, by way of adopting this code, that in fact it is safe to do so as the alternative of using a automatic pool cover as a barrier. So I found some facts. There's an organization called Stop Drowning Now, and there's a number of them, but I much appreciate that the city manager went to some significant strides to do some research and wasn't able to locate anything specifically talking about auto covers. And this doesn't specifically talk about auto covers, but it does make a really important point, which is it addresses the drowning statistics. So in the US, there are between 3,500 and 4,000 people that drown on an annual basis. That's in a 330 million person population in the United States. So we're talking about a very small percentage, not that any of those lives aren't valuable or don't deserve to be protected. By comparison, drunk driving on an annual basis, there's typically between 11 and 15,000 deaths, so significantly more rate, 3 times or 4 times the rate, just for comparison purposes. Drowning is the leading cause of unintentional injury-related death for children 1 to 4. Drowning remains in the top 5 causes of unintentional injury from birth to 5, and 23% of child drownings happen during a family gathering near a pool. So I highlight that as a point that I'll come back to. Children younger than 1 year old are more likely to drown at home, and 87% of drowning fatalities actually happen in home pools and hot tubs for children that are younger than 5. Most take places in pools owned by friends and family. And I think that this is why it's really important to note. It is safer to use an auto cover than having a traditional barrier. And the reason is because the statistics show that the majority of people who are injured and or die are a family member. They're coming out of the home, or that it's happening after gaining access to any external barrier. And by adopting a code which allows for an auto cover as an alternative would encourage people to get these kinds of covers, which would in fact save more and more lives. And I think what we will see is that over time the statistics will continue to decline as more people have these auto covers. So we do have an opportunity now to adopt something that is consistent with the rest of the state code that we enforce in the city, and will in fact be proven to be safer.